In this video, we're going to talk about while loops, which loop through something while a certain condition is true. Usually they're looping through arrays. Now there's three things that while loops always have to have. They have to have a counter, they have to have a while condition, which is a Boolean condition that's very similar to those if-else conditions that we had, and it has to have an incrementer. So let's walk through this through an example. So let's think about when you go to a library, you search for a book, and then in the laptop you're typing in the title of the book, and you get back a location, or a shelf location. So in this analogy, we need to create an array of book titles. So let's go ahead and make an array of book titles. Let's call it library. So we'll say let library be a string array. Remember, we use those brackets there to represent that. And we're going to set that equal to brackets as well. But let's go ahead and fill those brackets because our library has 4 books and we know exactly what they are. So we're going to put in there Harry Potter, let's put Green Eggs and Ham, Canterbury Tales, and JavaScript 101. Great. So now we have declared and initialized our library array. Let's go search through it. So to start searching, we need a counter. So we're going to say let I be a number, and we're going to set it equal to 0. So you don't always have to set your counter to start at 0, but it's a pretty set convention, so that's why we're starting with our counter at 0. Also, arrays are 0 indexed. So if you're grabbing things each time you go through the while loop at each index of the array and you want to start at the beginning, usually you're going to make your counter start as 0. So that's our counter. And then let's go ahead and talk about the condition of our while loop. Well, the key component of a while loop is this keyword while. So you just type while, and then you have those parentheses that we've seen before with if statements. So everything in the parentheses after this while word, if it evaluates to true, you go inside the while, you keep doing the while loop. If it's false, you exit the while loop. So let's ask, we want to keep searching through our library array so long as there's still books in our library. So that's the same thing as saying we want to keep doing our while loop so long as I is less than the length of our array. So we'll say while, in the parentheses, I is less than library.length. Then we're going to go inside, and this is where you do something with that. So what do we want to do in this scenario? We want to ask if the current book that we're at, the index of the array of, if its title is, let's say we're searching for JavaScript 101, then we want it to return to us the index, so then we can go find that book. So that's an if statement. So we'll say if library bracket I, so if the current index that we're at is equal to JavaScript 101, if that statement evaluates to true, we go inside our if statement and we want to print I. So we want to print the location in the array that JavaScript 101 is at. Also, awesome. And then we're going to leave this if statement. And this is the most important part of a while loop, is you have to remember to increment your counter. So you're going to say I equals I plus 1, which is the same thing as saying I plus equals 1. And this is just saying, okay, you've done something, now remember to increment the counter so that the next time we go through, we check the next thing in our array. So we just saw that 3 is printed. So that means JavaScript 101 is the 4th item in our array. I always mix this up because I forget that arrays are 0 indexed. But we know that they're not, so we know it's the 4th book on our shelf in the library. So now we can go to the library and find the 4th book and pull out JavaScript 101. So let's talk a little bit about what just happened though. So counter was 0, it went in, 0 is less than 4, we went inside, we asked, okay, is Harry Potter equal to JavaScript? No. Okay, counter equals 1. Is 1 less than 4? Is Green Eggs and Ham equal to JavaScript 101? No. Okay, counter is 2. Is 2 less than 4? No. And then it went to 3. Is And then it asks, finally, is JavaScript 101 equal to JavaScript 101? It said true. And then it incremented the counter to 4, and 4 is not less than 4. So then we left our while statement, and the code just keeps going down to the next thing below it.
Alright, so the code we've just written would work really well in a function. So we've written some code that looks for a specific book, but let's try and make this a function that can look for any book we want. So we're going to wrap the code that we just wrote inside a function. So before our while loop, and before we made our counter, we're going to say function find book. So this find book function that we're making takes in 2 parameters. The first one is a title, that's a string. And the second one is going to be a library, so let's call it a library. That's of type string array. And then our return type of the function is going to be a number, because we want this function to return the index of the title we're looking for in the library that we're looking in. Great. Then inside our function body, we're going to leave all of that code that we just wrote, and we're going to close the curly braces of our function after that. And be sure to make sure all the indentation is right. Great. So now we need to change a few things inside of our while loop. First, before we were looking for JavaScript 101 specifically, but this time we want to be able to pass in any title we want and look for it. So instead of JavaScript 101, we're going to use our title parameter. Great. And then now where we say print I, we don't want to print I to the screen. We want to return I from the function so we can use it however we want later. So we'll just say return I. Now VS Code is going to get mad at us for a second because we've written a function that has a return type but returns something inside an if statement. And if a return statement is inside an if statement, kind of by definition, it's possible that it doesn't return. So we're going to put another return statement outside of our while loop. So what if the title that we passed in doesn't exist in the string array that we're looking in? Then nothing will return inside the while loop, so after it we're going to say return -1 to say, hey, the book we're looking for doesn't exist. Great, so now we have a function that finds a certain book in an array of strings that's like a library. So let's try and use it. We're going to set up a position variable to store the result of our function call. So we'll say let position be a number, and we're going to assign that variable the result of our function call. So we'll say find book, and let's pass in Harry Potter as the book we're looking for, and as the argument to the second parameter, let's use our library variable that we set up before. Great. And then below that we can just say print position to see what the result of our function call was. And if we save that and run it, we should see that indeed Harry Potter was the first book in our library. And let's try it with a book that doesn't exist to test out all of the cases of our function. So if we say look for Hunger Games instead of Harry Potter, if we save that and run it, we should see -1 printed out to the screen. Awesome. So you've just learned about one of the most powerful tools that you have in your programming toolkit. Humans are usually really slow and don't like doing repetitive tasks over and over, but computers love doing the same thing over and over. And so while loops are one of the most powerful things we can use to have a computer work with a ton of data at once and do things really fast.